Welcome to the Irish NFL show and to the final part of our pre-draft preview. That's in association with our partners, the Aer Lingus College Football Classic and QuinnBet. We went from 20 to 11 last week. We have the top 10 coming right up. Just a reminder that there are still a few tickets available for this year's Aer Lingus College Football Classic at the Aviva on the 24th of August. That's between Georgia Tech and Florida State. Sneak peak, we have a Florida State player likely to go in the top 10 according to all our own picks and indeed the consensus pick. We also have, of course, a former Notre Dame player who featured in the College Football Classic game last year. You can go to collegefootballireland.com and get those tickets for this year's renewal of that Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Before we go from 10 to 1, just to note that QuinnBet have a couple of markets open around the draft. So you can bet on the first player selected in each position. For instance, that's first quarterback, first wide receiver, first cornerback, whatever you think. There's also a market on the first position drafted for each team. So that will be interesting, for example, if you were of the view, say, that the Patriots will trade out of the third pick because Drake May goes at number 2 to the Commanders. Maybe you like the odds on New England taking a non-QB with their first pick. That is, of course, for 18s only, and please always gamble responsibly. All right, on draft night itself, we'll be watching along with you in a live broadcast on YouTube and on the Irish NFL Show's Instagram channel. So that's all the way through the first round. Join us at 1 a.m. on Friday morning. Lord help us. We'll be there with full analysis from 1 right the way through to 32. We won't be going to bed until Roger Goodell sings at the end of that. So let's get our final pre-draft preview underway. And let's start with the Jets at 10. So consensus pick for the Jets, and this is per the NFL mock draft database, is Brock Bowers, the Georgia tight end. Some people reckon he's the most talented player in the draft, regardless of position. He's been well talked up. Our own picks, which we've posted on social and which you can see and laugh at your own leisure. Brian also has the Jets taking Brock Bowers. Kieran has Rome Odunze, Noel, Brock Bowers, Connor, me, Brock Bowers, and Shane has Brock Bowers as well. We'll start with you then, Kieran, because you're the one outlier here. You think Rome Odunze will still be available for the Jets, and you think he's the right call for Joe Douglas?
Yeah, I just think I think that it's gonna, a lot of stuff is gonna fly around in the first couple of picks. I think the Jets are gonna sit back and see what's left for them. I think they addressed a lot of things at free agency. They took care of a lot of holes that they had. I mean, nobody in Jets land, even though it's the Jets, foresaw what happened a couple of minutes into the first Monday Night Football game of the season. But offense is always, as long as I can remember watching the Jets, offense has always been a problem, and they've never had enough playmakers. They've had, Keyshawn Johnson, and they've had, various kind of wide receivers over the years. And Garrett Wilson has been great for him, but he can't do it himself, as we saw last year. I think I have a sneaky suspicion that Odunze is going to just lapse a little bit, and the Jets are going to pounce on that. He's your prototypical kind of Mike Evans type of wide receiver, 6'3", 215, and I spoke to Brian just before the national championship game, and he's a difference maker. He's a playmaker. I called it back then that he was going to be a difference maker in the league. I'm just going to slightly left, slightly off kilter, and I'm just going to put it out there, put my neck out there, saying that the Jets, Dunze will fall to the Jets in a huge need they have for them. Rodgers is going to need to spray the ball all over the place to be relevant. And taking care of, picking up Javon Kinlaw and Tyrod Taylor and people like that can only help the Jets. But Odunze is going to, he's going to be the guy that they can hang their hat on.
Yeah, and we shouldn't forget, Brian, that the Jets had a very active free agency. Mike Williams, another one to throw into the mix there, another potential target for Rodgers. You have them taking Brock Bowers, which is the consensus pick. He's a player that has a lot of people excited. I've heard him talked up as the new Travis Kelce, which is high praise indeed.
Yeah, fantastic player, and be a great, I suppose, another great addition to an offense that you could argue was stacked with great running backs there. And you bring in Mike Williams. I agree with Kieran in the sense of if the both of them are there at 10, I would lean Odunze as well. But I actually think what will happen, my guess is based on my mock draft is someone will jump the board to get up ahead of the Jets in order to take him wide receiver. And I've actually proposed that the Cardinals will be that team. Having moved down, potentially moving back up to 8, and that's the reason why I think they'll be comfortable sitting there and taking Brock Bowers. But I think if both of them are on the board at that stage, I do think they go wide receiver. But Brock Bowers is a great player in his own right, and we even discussed last week the narratives where he could even go before the Jets, depending on the nature of how things play out. It doesn't go to the trend in which we're expecting. You could see him arguably going before 10, but I think Jets sit there. I think they'll take him. But if a wide receiver's on the board, I think we might see a slightly different result.
No scenario, no, at all. Did you foresee where the Jets might either move up or move down? I mean, you would think crazy things can happen in the first few picks, and depending really on what happens at 2, that, you know, as Steve Weiss was saying to us in our interview the other night, that's kind of the pivot around which really the whole of the first round turns. Firstly, on which the top 10 turns. The Jets seem pretty clear that they want, or the consensus is that they're going to go for a big offensive weapon for Rodgers if one is available. But if one isn't, it's a totally different scenario then.
No, absolutely. But I mean, when it comes to maybe moving up or down, anything can happen with the draft. I mean, I have seen a lot of people talk about, you know, the Jets maybe trying to jump ahead of, say, the Bears or the Falcons to get one of those 3 wide receivers. So it all kind of depends on you know, where the chips fall as the draft goes on.
Joe Douglas ain't building for the future here. He's trying to save his job. If they don't win the Super Bowl next year or come damn close, the thing is a bust and he's gone.
No, that's it, absolutely, and that's why I went for Bowers myself. I mean, I do think I agree with the lads. If one of those 3 wide receivers are there, I think they take them first. But I think Brock Bowers is that next best option. I mean, I've seen some people say he's maybe the second or third best, you know, receiver in terms of catching the ball in the draft. And you said it there. This Jets team is set up. They have a really good defense. They put a lot of money in terms of Aaron Rodgers. That's why a lot of people I saw going for like tackle, and I don't think that helps them now. That's why I think a pass catcher to benefit Rodgers. And also you have to remember Williams is coming back from a big injury last year, so you have to see, you know, how long it takes him to get into it along with Aaron Rodgers. So, you know, I think they go for that pass catcher, that offensive weapon that can really make a difference in year 1.
Brian, the Bears, of course, are going big and then largely going home because they've only got 4 picks in the entire draft. Luckily for them, 2 of them fall in the top 10. This is the second one. It's the 9th pick we're looking at here. The consensus pick per the NFL mock draft database is Jared Verse, edge rusher from Florida State University. FSU, of course, playing in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic in the Aviva on the 24th of August. The Seminoles showing up there against Georgia Tech. Our picks. So Shane has Malik Neighbors going to the Bears at 9. I have Jared Verse at 9. Noel has Rome Odunze. Kieran has Dallas Turner, and you have Dallas Turner, the Alabama pass rusher, who many people believe is the best one available in the draft. Why him, and why do you think he's still going to be available at 9?
The Steve Weiss interview kind of gave a lot away. A great, fantastic opportunity again to have him back on the show. We were privileged again, Connor, and he touched on the fact that the Falcons, whilst they're very strong on defense and their tout is taking a defensive player across the board in majority of the mocks, he still feels there's a potential opportunity for him to move out. And I think they're primed for a move out. I'm looking at it and where as we get closer and you hear all the various different stories, you wonder which teams are comfortable moving out. I think the Falcons would be comfortable moving out. And in that instance, then you get some other team comes up with a different need, i.e. wide receiver, which we just discussed. And that allows Dallas Turner to drop to the Bears. And having come to a bit of Bears content myself, Speak used to, would well know there's a lot of positions that are in need. I think the Bears are comfortable at 9 picking the player that they believe is the best player available at the time. And I think if they get an edge rusher like Dallas Turner, I think they'd be delighted to walk away from it at 9. That's the nature of that. It's if wide receivers on the board, different conversation. But the way I've rejected it, I think it's relevant that I think the Bears do need an edge rusher still, despite what they did last year in free agency. Dallas Turner for me.
Noel, I'd be interested in your thought process because I was torn in about 4 different ways on this one. In one scenario that I had gamed out for myself, I thought the Bears would go O-line. In another scenario, I thought, well, if Dallas Turner's available, then they probably take him. Then I started watching a bit of tape and I thought, Jared Verse is kind of a nice fit for what the Bears might like to do. And because they got Sweat, he doesn't necessarily need to be the perfectly molded product that I think Dallas Turner is. Maybe they can afford someone who's a little bit rougher, but maybe has a higher ceiling like Verse. And then I started thinking, well, do they trade out of this one altogether and accumulate draft capital because they've only got 4 picks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bears are fascinating with this specific pick. Obviously, we know the 4th pick is a foregone conclusion. This one, they could go anywhere. I'm even starting to think over the last day or two, they may even jump up to try and get one of those wide receivers, maybe use the Carolina pick next year to kind of use that as a bit of value to get up there. For me, I think they're in a great position. I think there will be good players available there. You know, if they sit at 9, there will be good players who fall to them. Now, obviously, edge rusher is the biggest gap that you would look at on this roster. But for me personally, I like Verse and I like Turner. I don't know if I liked them enough. I think there may be better players available in different positions who I like, who they could go for. But again, that's the beauty of where they are. They could, if a wide receiver falls, I think that's a no-brainer. They do it. And I think, for example, if somehow a Joe Alt fell, which he won't, they do that. Other than that, then I think they have options. I've seen Byron Murphy being mentioned. I don't know if you want to pick him at 9, but maybe there's a possibility there of dropping back 3 or 4 places if you can find somebody who wants to move up and get him there. So I think the Bears do have options. You wouldn't be surprised whichever way they go. You could look at tackle, receiver on the edge, or maybe defensive tackle, and you could say any one of them, they could end up getting a really good player there. As you say, though, with 4 picks, maybe Ryan Poles does want to kind of beef that up a bit. So it'll be fascinating to see what way they actually go in the end.
Kieran, you've gone Dallas Turner as well, and I know you've watched a lot more of these guys playing than we have. I've been looking at the tape, as I said, and I thought first was really exciting. And there's a few guys that you look at that there's a lot of unpolished diamonds in this draft, and I know it's not perceived as being a particularly deep one for defensive players and for edge rushers in particular, but. Is it Turner or bust for you? If he's not available, you think they go else? They trade down, or would they go for one of the other pass rushers if he doesn't fall to them? If you, for instance, go to the Falcons at 8, as some people think he will.
Yeah, the Bears needs. I mean, linebacker and defensive line is a big hole in their roster right now. They did address. We all know they picked up Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift. They had a decent finish to the season, 4-2 after Thanksgiving. They're trying to build on that momentum that they kind of ran out of in the season. I just see, an edge or linebacker like Dallas Turner is going to be a huge addition for Chicago.
Because you can and it's interesting you call it linebacker, right? I know it's not a premium position unless you're the Baltimore Ravens, and it hasn't worked out too badly for them paying guys in that position. The Bears do pay linebackers like the Ravens. They could trade out of this and probably still pick up someone like a Chop Robinson, who's hugely exciting.
Yeah, I think they like Dallas Turner. I mean, he's when you put out there Alabama linebacker, people's eyes kind of wide, they get wide. It's a football factory for a reason. I know Saban's not there anymore, but for a decade plus, they've been at the forefront of providing phenomenal players for the NFL. He's a South Florida boy. South Florida is that's basically ground zero for NFL players in America. 6'4". He's kind of on the small side, 251, but his speed is what brings it to him. 4.46 40. He's just like lightning, just throwing his body around and abandoned. 10 sacks in 14 games last year. He's the difference maker that Chicago needs back there. They've, like I said earlier, they've made some big splashes in free agency. With the limited picks they have, they're going to look around at maybe a guard or pad up the O-line, but a big signing like Dallas Turner is going to say a lot about their intentions for the new year. And I like Turner at 9.
All right, let's look at the Falcons at 8. The consensus pick there is actually Dallas Turner, who we've just talked about. But Brian, you think potentially Malik Neighbors is available for the Falcons at 8 and would be a good fit for them?
Well, this is where I think the draft gets interesting, because I have the Cardinals trading up to 8. So my strategy is they're going to move out of 4 and allow the Vikings to come up and take JJ McCarthy. But having looked at the coverage of Marty Osborne last year and how he liked to wheel and deal and how they quickly traded out of the top, or was it the second pick, allowing the Texans to come back up? They back and go into the teens, jump back up to 6. So I don't think he's opposed to moving around the board. I can see a scenario where they take the Vikings extra pick. They find themselves with 11 and 23. Quickly move back up to 8 to get a wide receiver, because let's be fair, they do need a more.
You can be too cute on that one though, and end up
absolutely
back up, or not being able to get back up for the guy you want.
True, but this is why I think the Falcons are primed in a prime position to move down. They're not going to move down too far to go 8 to 11. They probably pick up an additional pick, a later round pick, and still get what they believe to be a need. And I think the Cardinals need a wide receiver. Let's be fair to. They've been mocked to, Marvin Harrison Jr. by all accounts, but pretty much I'd say 90% of the mock drafts. But there's still that piece that sits there that people are saying, well, it's the first 3 quarterbacks will go off the board, and whatever particular position, maybe 2 and 3 are still up for grabs in terms of who's going to go 2, then 3 with the Patriots and the Commanders. I think really it starts at 4, because we really don't know what the Cardinals are going to do. Are they going to take a wide receiver? If they feel that they're comfortable staying there, they will. But I think they can see a scenario where they can move down, still get one of the top 3. Like even today, you listen to a number of podcasts, people are suggesting now that Malik Neighbors is the better pick over Marvin Harrison. It really is very much down to what they feel is the right need within the scheme they want to play. So it's not against the realms of possibility to move down and whatever particular scenario. So for that reason, I'm thinking they're going to jump They're going to push, jump, find a way to come back up, get a wide receiver. Bit of a play from me, but it'll make for an exciting draft tomorrow night.
No, you're going edge rusher as well, which has been really a long-standing need that the Falcons have had to address for some time. A lot of things kind of clicking into place, provided that Kirk Cousins is the Kirk Cousins he was, and provided he remains upright. And we'll come to that in a moment when we look at Kieran's pick. But you see edge is the way to go for them.
Yeah, I think we can see the moves they've already made on offense. You talk about Kirk Cousins there, and they've brought in other players there, and they have good young players already on offense. I think they've had a glaring hole for a number of years now when it comes to that edge and getting pressure on quarterbacks. And for everything Kieran said about Dallas Turner, he is a very good player. And I think there's a need there for the Falcons to maybe just try and plug that hole once and for all, see if they can bring someone in who can really make a difference for them, because I think they have a good young team. And if they can just get someone exciting like that who can put a bit of pressure on quarterbacks, it can make all the difference for them. So I do think they stick where they are. And I think, Dallas Turner will be there, and I think they will make that move to bring him in.
Kieran, you have them going for Jackson Powers-Johnson, and I'm interested in the logic in this one, because I think from some senses it absolutely makes perfect logic, because this is a guy who looks like he can play pretty much anywhere across the O-line. A lot of people think he's the best offensive lineman available in the draft, so he's not necessarily the consensus number one pick, but I've heard a lot of smart people say this is a guy who's a great value pickup if you're in a position to take him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a college football junkie, and I watch a lot of the late night games. I mean, there's no Pac-10 or Pac-12 anymore, but he was a linchpin of the Oregon team that got to the championship game. 320, 6'3", he's your guard. But the great thing about Powers-Johnson is he can transition to center, but he can transition to left or right guard. His versatility is what they need, and we got, Kirk Cousins is not getting any younger. They're going to need somebody to keep him upright, and I think Powers-Johnson is going to be a solid pick for the Falcons. Led all FBS centers and run blocking. He was second in pass blocking last year. His versatility and his size is what is at play here. The Falcons had a decent finish towards the end of the year. I know they finished 7-10, but they need somebody up there to protect Kirk Cousins. That's my logic for picking him. Get another year or two out of his career, but somebody solid there that can keep him upright.
Julie Cousins thanks you for thinking of her husband's safety. Star of the Netflix series, for those who haven't seen, a quarterback from last year. Julie and Brittany Mahomes definitely had plenty of screen time on that one. Titans at 7. Consensus pick there is Joe Alt, offensive tackle from Notre Dame, who was, incidentally, as we mentioned at the top, in Dublin for the Aer Lingus College Football Classic game against Navy at the Aviva last year. Our own picks, Brian also has Joe Alt. Kieran has Jared Verse, who we've already talked about, an FSU player. Noel has Olu Fashanu, or Fashanu, sorry, as I've been corrected on the pronunciation there.
I still call him Fashanu.
That's an interesting one, Noel, and I might start with you there. Penn State player. I just looked at his PFF stats. Olu Fashanu played 3 years in college, did not allow a single sack across those 3 seasons. 1 QB hit in those 3 years. That's a guy you want in front of you. People are criticizing his run blocking, and I say, you keep the most expensive asset on the field upright, you'll have a job for life.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, I think ideally they want Joe Alt, and maybe he'll fall there, but as we've kind of done our kind of mock, I have Joe Alt going a bit sooner than that. But I think Fashanu is a guy who can come in and make a difference for them straight away. He's 6'6", I think nearly 320 pounds. They have Will Levis there, and I think they're still trying to find out if he is the guy or not. I know they brought in Cushenberry at center there, and they brought in Ridley, wide receiver, to give him weapons and protection. And I think they still need a bit more protection on that line to really give that young quarterback a chance to find out if he is who they hope he is, and they can move with him from there. So I think I can't see pass tackle for this pick for them. And as I say, Alt, I would say they would go for where you're available, but for me, I think he will be gone. So that's why I say Fashanu for me is the second best tackle in the draft, and someone who I think will benefit them.
Brian, it's strong horses for you as well. You see them taking Joe Alt at 7. He's a monster.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely critical need. I was listening to some stuff to say they need a left tackle, they potentially need a guard, they potentially even, you could argue, they need a centre. various different positions, but ultimately everybody is suggesting Titans need help. They need to secure what they believe is the future in terms of with their quarterback from last year, and who they picked in the second round, and obviously we saw him towards the back end of the season. And this time last year, suggested he was going to go as a first round pick, and we saw the owner being very committed to him over the course of the off season. So they fundamentally need to put players around him, and I think that's where they're going to go. And very much where Noel sees it, my scenario sees Joe Alt falling, but I can certainly see where he's going with this. But ultimately, Joe Alt is the marquee offensive line player on the board, and I think he falls to the Titans at 7.
Kieran, you haven't taken Jared Verse.
Yeah, I do. Poor finish of the season for the Titans, 3-7 in the last 10 games, but that did include beating Jacksonville in the penultimate game, knocking them out of the playoff contention. We've already discussed their free agency pickups, Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard, but a big horse like this on defense is what's needed. I'm rooting here for the Florida boy, local Florida kid. 260 last year. He had 41 tackles, 9 sacks, 11 QB hurries. He's just a guy that's going to disrupt any kind of offense. He's mobile. He's always moving. He's always, fooling the offense and keeping them on their toes. Titans need to make a statement with a player on defense. They got to, bring that identity back. That kind of, that blue collar kind of mentality that they bring. And I think he's the perfect one for it. He had a kind of slow start to his career, transition to FSU from Albany. So he was kind of unheralded for a year or two, but he hit the ground running with FSU, brought his weight up, and the skill set just kind of from osmosis with a lot of those horses up in Florida State. He's been NFL ready since last year, and I see him making a big impact with Tennessee.
All right, we move to 6 now, which is the last pick of the first segment of our top 10 pre-draft preview. Giants pick at 6. The consensus pick there is Rome Odunze, Washington wide receiver. Our picks, Shane has Joe Alt going at 6, the offensive lineman we've talked about. I have the Giants taking Malik Neighbors. Noel has Joe Alt. Kieran has them taking Drake May. We'll go to that in just a moment. Brian, you have them taking Odunze. You think he'll be available there, and he's the right guy for Joe Shane.
Yeah, I know where Kieran's going to go on this, and I appreciate it. So I'm looking forward to hearing his piece on it. But I just don't think they're going to be in a position to get the quarterback, and I don't think they're going to be comfortable moving up to give away what needs to be given away in terms of future picks. The Giants have only got 6 picks this year. They're not stacked like previous years. So I think they sit tight, and very much stands around. It's down to what Joe Shane believes is the appropriate wide receiver. And I saw various different reports over the past few weeks. They believe Malik Neighbors. I think it might be a bit of a smokescreen. I think Shane has a tendency to try be a little bit cute with people in terms of trying to give away a certain smokescreen. I think certainly wide receiver in play, but I think it's Rome Odunze, and I think actually people would be genuinely surprised. I think people would believe if it is to be a wide receiver, it'll be Malik Neighbors. I think you go a different route.
Noel, if you've lost your quarterback to a season-ending injury, obviously you want to take a look at the offensive line, particularly one that I think was in the top 2 in terms of sacks allowed last year. It was not a fun time to be behind that particular line. You have Joe Alt going to them.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see Shane meant that way as well. I thought I was going to be out on an island there all on my own. But no, and I can see where Brian's coming from, because wide receiver seems to be the consensus there, and I can understand it with the 3 guys that, one who could fall to them, they are top players. But as you say, I just think, you get the quarterback gets injured there last year. I think you need to build out from the trenches. I think when you see the top tackle in the draft fall into you, I just think that's a player it's hard to turn down. I think he's a player who, I know he's 6'8", and he's a big guy. There has been questions whether maybe he's a little too tall, but I don't think that's an issue with him. I know he's a former tight end, so he's fairly athletic, and he's just a player, I think, that the Giants, if they're sitting there with the issues they've had on the line, I think it's very hard to turn down Joe Alt if he falls to you at number 6 there. So that's why I think they might just plumb there. But again, you wouldn't be shocked if it's the wide receiver, because there's some pretty good guys there as well, and something they could also use.
Kieran, you have Joe Shane nutting up here, doing the Randy Marsh into the wheelbarrow and going to get Drake May. I love it. How's he going to manage that?
Oh, Lord, listen. Joe Shane, and in hashtag in Shane we trust, is firmly going to pull this off. I don't know how he's going to do it, But I see Drake, and what's interesting is I don't know if anyone's seen the buzz around yesterday and today, but it's been a lot about Penix and Drake May. We got to remember where Shane and Dable came from. They came from Buffalo, where Josh Allen was was turned into this absolute phenom. Now, I mean, despite his flaws, we're looking at a quarterback that has very similar characteristics: 6'4", 230. Had a very good career in North Carolina. Only played 3 seasons there. North Carolina playing the ACC. They play Florida State, Georgia Tech, teams like that. 24 touchdowns last year, 9 interceptions, threw for over 3,000 yards. They're looking for somebody that's that Josh Allen type of quarterback. That's their wheelhouse. But you also have to remember this is year 3, and there may not be a year 4 if they whiff on a quarterback. I think they're going to put all their eggs in a basket. They may end up giving, they have. I think they have 6 picks. They may end up throwing a couple of 5th and 6th in there just to sweeten the pot, or maybe a 1 or 2 next year to do something. But this is situation critical for the Giants. I mean, Daniel Jones's injury record is not stellar. They can't hang their hat on him next year. And yeah, it would be great to get Neighbors or Odunze, but you need a gunslinger back there to make things happen. So I see the Giants do. I would be very not disappointed, but I'd be surprised if they come away tomorrow without a quarterback in the first round.
Brian, did I go to you here? Sorry, I'm losing track of me.
No, you did. Yeah, I obviously come with the wide receiver. See, I see another scenario where it's all well and good finding your quarterback in the future, but ultimately, if you have nobody to throw the ball to, we're so restricted in terms of what we have available. For
my husband can't throw the ball and catch it. You're channeling Giselle here now.
But they got Darren Waller. But oh no, wait, never mind.
No. He has his own personal issues going on off the field as well now. He's due to be divorced very shortly. But I wonder, as another scenario, I don't want to get too into the Giants because we can do this tomorrow night. We'll be talking in depth about every team throughout the live broadcast. But is there a scenario where they just say, we'll sit tight, we'll take the wide receiver here, and then we'll come around again and try to get back into the first round and essentially use those picks in which Kieran is considering giving away, whether it's next year or late in the draft, to get back in? And maybe that Michael Penix story is fruitful in the sense that they get him, but they just don't get him until later on in the first round, haven't moved back up. And I think that could be the likely scenario for Penix anyway. I haven't spoke about it last week. But enough of the Giants. There we go.
Hold that thought, and we'll keep our hot takes close to our chests, like GMs keeping the draft cards close to their chests ahead of the live show tomorrow, as you say, Brian. There'll be plenty of time to get into all that. But that is it for the first segment of our top 10 first round draft pick preview. We're going to take a look at the top 5 draft picks now in the second segment of our final pre-draft preview on the NFL show. We come in at 5 with the Chargers. The consensus pick for them, according to the NFL mock draft database, which crunches all the numbers and looks at all of the mock draft boards, they reckon is Malik Neighbors, wide receiver, LSU. Our picks, Shane has them taken Marvin Harrison Jr. I have them taken Rome Odunze. Noel has them taken Malik Neighbors. Kieran has them taken Marvin Harrison Jr. And Brian, you have them taken Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. Does he fall to 5, or do they have to go up to get him? Sorry, I haven't looked at whether you're factoring in a trade here.
I am factoring in a trade. I'm factoring in the Vikings moving up to 4. We spoke about the Cardinals there, and I had this strategy of them moving around the board, and essentially that means them getting out there at 4 and being comfortable doing that, allowing the Vikings to come up. And I'm kind of giving my 4th pick away now, but that leads to Marvin Harrison essentially sitting there. And there's been a lot of talk that the right thing to do for the Chargers would be to take offensive line and start giving Justin Herbert additional security. I think with Marvin Harrison on the board, I think it's too much to give away. And there's also talk today the Colts are going to try push to get into the top 5 to get Marvin Harrison Jr. and reunite him with the team, which his father played for. So I think as we get close tomorrow, he might even become the bigger, harder prospect and potentially a quarterback in terms of teams potentially moving up. But I think the Chargers would be mad to step away from. They've lost Mike Williams, they've lost Eckler, they've lost Ray. We talk about Keenan Allen going to the Bears. They're very light touch in a lot of positions offensively. I think he would make so much sense, and I think he'd be a marquee player to have alongside Justin Herbert.
You have Malik Neighbors going at 5, Noel, to the Chargers. He's one of those players, again, there's usually about 5 or 6 in every first round who the opinion varies wildly on, and the longer you go on with it, like I've had every take on Malik Neighbors too. He's an absolute dud. He plays in the slot the whole time. He's not NFL ready, can't run the route tree, right the way through to don't sleep on this guy. He's the best wide receiver in the draft. You'd be mad to take Marvin Harrison Jr. above him.
I'm not quite there now. I think Neighbors is the second best receiver in the draft after Marvin Harrison Jr. But for a lot of what Brian said there. You know, they lost their wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. You know, they need to fill those gaps. And I think, again, I don't think there's a huge difference between the first and second wide receiver. So I think when a player like this at a position where you absolutely have a need for your young quarterback to have more weapons, I just think it's hard to turn down a player like Neighbors if you're the Chargers. I know people have talked about them maybe moving out, but I think if they can get Harrison or they can get Neighbors, I think you make that move, because that just helps your young quarterback so much to have a player like that in there.
Kieran, you have, and we're factoring in trades again here just so people are aware, but you have Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Chargers, who I'm sure Justin Herbert would love to have in his arsenal. Like, people talk about the Bills trying to emulate the Chiefs and, you know, have Josh Allen bring the best out of a bunch of palookas, but Justin Herbert doesn't look like the guy who's going to be able to do that. So you want a blue chip receiver in there for him.
Yeah, you do. I mean, you lost a lot on offense. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, like we said already. Chargers, I mean, we all know what happened at the tail end of last season. They've got to reestablish themselves, not just in the league, but also in their own city. I mean, a lot of people have said that stadium is a home game to a lot of road teams, and they have to start establishing an identity. I think a stud like Marvin Harrison will start with that. Herbert needs somebody who he can trust. Harbaugh is going to need somebody that can, you know, get the points going in the first couple of games. I watched a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. with Ohio State this past season, you know, just beating up on Michigan State and Purdue and putting up 2-3 touchdowns and, you know, 240, 250 yards a game. He ended up the season with 14 touchdowns. Ohio State kind of faded towards the end against Michigan, but 1,200 some odd yards. He's a no doubter. You can tell people in college, and you can tell players, whether it be Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, you know, you can tell when they're going to be studs and horses in the NFL. And you know, not even taking into account the pedigree with his father. I mean, he's just there's a lot of maybes in the NFL. He's pretty much nailed on wide receiver one. So I think he's going to do great things with Los Angeles.
Well, let's go to number 4 now, where the Cardinals' consensus pick is Marvin Harrison Jr. That, depending on what happens further up the board, and, you know, this is really between 1, 2, 3, and 4 where all the action could happen, and we're obviously hoping from a drama point of view that there will be plenty of it on the night. We're kind of split between ourselves here as regards whether that will happen or not, though, and maybe I'll get to the alternative scenario first. No, you see them taking Marvin Harrison Jr. and him being available at 4. If you're committed to Kyler Murray as the quarterback, which Gannon and the organization are, then you want the very best available for him to throw to, and they haven't really had that X receiver for him prior to his injury, and that's what they want.
Absolutely. Look, it's very similar to the Chargers, the spot before. You have a young, talented quarterback that you really need to give the best chance, and you have massively gaping hole at wide receiver. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is arguably, you know, depending on who you talk to, if not the best player in the draft, certainly the second or third best player within the draft. And I think, again, it's a very big player to pass up on when you have such a need, and his potential is sky high. So for me, I think they make that move. As you say, you've got Kyler Murray there. You've got a lot of money invested in him. You want to make sure he has the tools that he needs. And starting off with potentially the best player in the draft, who is a wide receiver, is a great start to start building up. Because I know the Cardinals have a lot of picks anyway, so they can build from there.
Kieran, you have Malik Neighbors going at 3.
Yeah.
4 rather. Sorry, 4.
Yeah, sorry, 4. Yeah. I mean, that Cardinals roster right now does not look like an NFL roster. They need skilled position players to help out Kyler Murray. Malik Neighbors, 6 foot. He's your classic kind of slot receiver. You think of, NFL slot receivers that are, putting up monster numbers. You think of Justin Jefferson, the guy that got paid with the Browns today, St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, even somebody like Chris Godwin. He's got those kind of characteristics. A shade over 6 foot, about 200 pounds. Makes catches for fun. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's got fantastic speed and a one-on-one jump situation. He's always coming out against the corner. Cardinals are going to take him because they need skill positions. They need a wide receiver one, and they need someone to take the load off James Conner. So that's where they're going.
Brian, we've tried to avoid the spoiler on this one, but it's hard as we move through the previous picks. You have a scenario, both yourself and Shane, in fairness, have the same scenario here where JJ McCarthy goes at 4. How does that come about?
Yeah, I think once we have a comment in around, do we think the Giants could trade up to 4? I think that's we have spoke with the Giants 6, and Kieran is suggesting that potentially that is in play, that they could come up to 4 or 3. So there's very different scenarios. I think it's relevant to call it here because we are talking about questions coming around the 4th pick. I just think we've seen too much over the course of the last month. I mean, the Vikings have put themselves in a position which allows them to come up. So they've got the 11th pick, the 23rd pick. I think the Cardinals, I touched on it there, having saw it last year in terms of the jostling, which is the GM does. I think he'd be comfortable moving out. And the Cardinals, for me, are a real intriguing team. And again, we're going to get into it tomorrow night. But if they were to make this trade, and let's bear in mind that they have the 27th pick, they've got the Texans pick from last year's trade to get Will Anderson on the back of them taking CJ Stroud. The Cardinals could be looking at having the 11th, 23rd, and the 27th. Like that's a lot of ammunition to move around the board potentially with additional picks later on, or get 3 stud players in this draft, because this is highly touted as one of the best drafts for some time. And we saw life from this Cardinals team towards the back end of the season when Kyler Murray came back. They looked like a team, going in the right direction. I think we were pleasantly surprised by the head coach. Early on in the season, looked like they were going to be the whipping boys, but we saw quickly that kind of changed early on, and they beat the Cowboys. I mean, if I was the Cardinals fan, I'd be optimistic.
I'm just interested in your thought, and maybe this is something that we'll get into in more detail tomorrow night. But if the Cardinals say trade out of this, and they don't get the stud receiver, and this is something we can spend a little bit more time on tomorrow, not to frustrate people by saying, "Oh, we'll get to that tomorrow." But the record of taking wide receivers in the first round, unless you take one of the top 2 or 3 off the board, hasn't actually been particularly good over the last couple of years. For all the hits, there's plenty of misses in the first round as well. And you can get cute and decide to pass up with Justin Jefferson, and you end up with Kadarius Toney.
That is true. I would suggest if the wide receiver's not there, if they don't move back up, say they do trade back to 11, I think they'd be comfortable going in a different position. I think they'd look to get the wide receiver potentially in the middle or late first round. As Kieran's alluded to over the course of the last few weeks, there's some other valuable wide receivers in the draft, and another one coming down at LSU, which is further down the rankings in terms of matching up against Malik Neighbors. But I still think there's enough there for them to consider, which I think a lot of teams will feel. If we don't get one of these marquee wide receivers in the top 3, we'll get someone else in the first round. I think the Cardinals will be comfortable at that. Maybe that's what they do with that 27th pick. But I think if they're at 11, having traded out, or whatever team comes up to 4, I think they might reposition themselves in terms of what they do with their opening pick. And they may go defense, and they may go edge rusher. So it could be a scenario where a Dallas Turner or Bears goes there. But yeah, I get it. I understand it. And the nature, they do need a wide receiver. But I think there's enough there for them to justify moving down if they get the value.
Okay, let's jump to 3, because I want to go to you on this, Kieran, first up, because you're looking at a trade. You're looking at JJ McCarthy, but you see him going to 3 instead of 4.
Yeah, I see the Vikings moving up. I mean, they got the 11-23. They might even throw in the first next year just to sweeten the pot. Patriots have not shot down any suggestions that they're closed on 3. They've been very talkative about the fact that they're open to anything, and we see a lot of teams shoot down, we're not open or we're not thinking about anything, and then you get to Thursday night about 8:00, and then the rumors start flying, and next thing you know, teams are picking the phone up and going back and forth. Vikings, there's an obvious quarterback need. McCarthy's a bit of an enigma. If you had asked me a couple of months ago, would he be a first rounder, I would have said no. Game manager, just doing enough under Harbaugh to get wins. But the more you read, the more you see, the more you hear, there's a lot of movement towards him in the first 10 and even the top 5. Not outstanding numbers, 49 TDs and 11 picks in 3 years in college. You think about that, 49 touchdowns in 3 years. That's not a number that stands out really when you're playing in the Big Ten and you're beating up on smaller teams. 27-1 as a starter. That's what I think a lot of GMs are looking at. Under Harbaugh, that's you have that winning mentality already there. He's had a huge amount of, I don't want to say NFL ready players, but Blake Corum, Roman Wilson to throw to, and he's always had huge horses up front to block for him. So he's not really been tested to that extent. But a lot of people, and I've listened to a lot of people say that, once the shackles come off, he's going to be a gunslinger and he's going to be a real difference maker in the NFL. They're selling me on it. I think a combination of all that, plus the fact that the Vikings are just dying for a quarterback, leads me to believe that they're going to push not the panic button, but the the let's go button, and they're going to pick up.
But it's a real tale of, and I'm really interested in the way this one goes down tomorrow night. There's a lot of picks that we're really interested in, obviously, but this one, because it's a tale of two situations, right? You think, if I'm JJ McCarthy or I'm whoever goes to the Vikings, that's a great spot to end up in. Kevin O'Connell really knows what he's doing. That team was going really well before Cousins got injured. They've a lot of the pieces in place. Really exciting what Brian Flores did with very little available to him on the defensive side, and the way he creatively blitzed the hell out of people was a joy to behold last season for those of us who like a bit of dog in our defensive football. But on the other hand, if the Patriots don't go for the quarterback, and there's people making the argument that they shouldn't, because you're just going to break whatever guy comes in, because it's a bad situation to land in. There is an argument for them trading out of that, going filling roster holes elsewhere, and just rolling with what they have.
Who do you want that one, Conor? Do you want me to jump in on that one, Dean?
Sorry, you jump in on that one. Yeah, go on, Brian.
No, I just think of all the teams tomorrow night, who's going to let that clock tick down at 3? It's the Patriots. We've seen time and time again, fans will say, "Oh, they know who they're picking? Make that selection." But in this case, I think the Patriots are open to moving down. I think of all the teams, it's been well touted and over the course, in particular over the last week as we get closer, that they are extremely comfortable moving down if the right offer comes in. And I think they will allow every opportunity for someone to come in and hit that panic button or the let's go button, which Kieran has alluded to. But I think if it's the Vikings, I think that type of scenario would happen very quickly. I think the deal would be done quite quickly. I think it's a scenario where someone else might panic, thinking the Vikings have it done, i.e. the Giants, and move up quickly, move up. But I think of all the picks tomorrow night, we might be watching that clock tick down for 10 minutes, waiting for the Patriots to come in. I think they will allow themselves every opportunity to get a deal from somewhere.
No, I won't ask you how far you think the clock will tick down, but you have the Patriots taking Jayden Daniels at 3.
No, I actually have the Vikings moving up to take Jayden Daniels there. So I'm along with Kieran there, actually, in terms of, look, the Vikings made a big call when they let Kirk Cousins go. And as you say, they are a team that is primed for a good quarterback to come into to kind of hit the ground running. I think New England have so many holes there. And you said it yourself, Conor. They could break any young quarterback that comes in there. There's no wide receivers. There's no line. I just don't see the sense in them taking a quarterback there now. I think they could move back. The Vikings have locked and loaded and ready. We see the picks they've built up to kind of make that move. So I think it kind of fits right for both teams. I think Jayden Daniels will be the last of the big 3 quarterbacks kind of waiting there. I don't see the JJ McCarthy move that people are talking about. I don't see him jumping that high. I think Daniels is a player who can come in, and he's probably one of the more NFL-ready quarterbacks. I think he could come into that team and kind of really make an impact. Obviously, when you have Justin Jefferson there, that's a massive kind of boost. But yeah, I think that's the way it works out. I think the Vikings they've set themselves up. They need to make a move given what they've done. And I think the Patriots are a good team to trade down, because they need to make lots of moves with that roster they have, especially on offense.
Very good. Sorry, my mistake. No, I see now that you had Jayden Daniels through a trade there. Misread my script again. Having a nightmare here tonight. Brian, let's come to you for the Commanders at 2. The consensus pick is Jayden Daniels, and that indeed is what you see Washington doing with their pick.
Yeah, I think over the course of the last week, we've seen these conversations around him being a bit disappointed with the nature of the visit, with all the various different other quarterbacks coming in, and we even spoke to Steve Weish about it. He's felt that might have been a story last week. It's kind of gone away now, and they've figured it all out, and they've come to a clear understanding of the nature of that. In fact, I haven't read too much.
Weish did make an interesting point, which a lot of people had forgotten about, and it was well made, that's exactly the narrative that was around CJ Stroud and the Texans last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what happens come draft night, I think all these smoke screen and storylines go away, because ultimately they make the pick. And I think we always see general managers very quickly thereafter, when they do the opening press conference, say, he was always their guy, he was always their selection. Of course they're going to say that, they're not going to say anything otherwise, but I think we're seeing that tomorrow night. And I think over the course of the last few days, it's starting to kind of ease off. I think ultimately come 1:30 a.m. thereabouts tomorrow night, going into Friday morning, I think ultimately Jayden Daniels will be will be the selection of the Commanders, and I think they'll be comfortable with what they do.
Noel, you have Drake May going at 2 rather than Jayden Daniels, as you've explained. Jayden going in a trade at 3 in your view. Drake May, we've talked about a little bit already. Why do you think he fits what Washington is trying to do?
I think for me, it came down to obviously Daniels and May. And I think while Daniels may hit the ground running next season a bit better than May, I think May has that bigger upside over the long term. And I think if you're Washington, you have a new owner, you have a new, coaches, everything is new there. You have that time to bring in what I think is a quarterback who can develop into a really, really good player. You look at him, he has the build, he is athletic. Like, he's not a runner like Daniels, but he can move if he needs to. He has a massive arm, a few accuracy issues. But again, as I say, that's something I think you can deal with and you can work with. But I think in the long term, a team that's kind of building out again with new ownership and everything, I think he is the quarterback they could bring in for the long term. So that's why I kind of have him nudged ahead of Daniels. And well, look, who knows? Between the two of them, it could go either way. But I just think that upside gives them that a bit of an edge for the Commanders in their building process.
Daniels at 2 works for you as well, Kieran. Again, both sides of the spectrum here. On one side, the narrative is this guy looks the part, much in the way that Joe Burrow looked the part. He exploded. Once he has weapons around him, he can take absolute advantage of them and just let him go.
Yeah. Washington are in a position right now where they've got to start, pulling back on the rest of the NFC East. They've fallen so far behind, and not just the league, but also, in that division. They now have the longest active playoff win drought. It's going to be 20 years in a year's time. Since 2005, they haven't had a playoff win. Dan Quinn is going to have to hit the ground running. He knows that he's got a fan base and he's got, new owners that are going to want to see some results pretty quickly. They need a lot, and luckily they have 9 picks, so they're going to spread those around. And I think it's pretty front loaded. They've got a lot in the second and third. They haven't added a lot, Austin Eckler and Zach Ertz, but Marcus Mariota is not going to do it at quarterback. I think Jayden Daniels is the obvious pick for him at 2. My concern with Jayden Daniels, and obviously they need a lot of other stuff, but my concern with Jayden Daniels is his size, 6'4", 181. That speaks to me more of a slot receiver or a wide receiver 1. I've heard a lot of talk that he's going to have to bulk up 20 to 25 pounds to get up there. I just don't see him staying at a weight like that. He's going to have to get up to 215. He put up huge numbers at LSU, but
on the plus side though, Kieran, there's money to be made there for endorsing whichever supplement helps him get up to 215. That's likely to be his first partnership, his brand partnership.
As big as the guys are in the league, they hit that much harder. I mean, in college, they hit that much harder in the NFL, and he's gonna have to bulk up a little bit to absorb those hits. He's going to get up to at least 210. They did pick up Biadasz. I think that's how you pronounce it, from the Cowboys. He's got all the characteristics to be a great, start for the Washington Commanders. But they have a huge amount of holes to fill in there, pretty much everywhere, whether it be guard, tackle, corner.
You've Daniels going to them as well, Brian. But again, as Kieran's outlined there, they've kind of seen this movie before in Washington, and I'm sure they also will be a little bit anxious given the way the RG3 career ended for him, having had such an exciting and explosive first season. Injuries obviously derailed his career, and he was never the same again. And we've, Daniels has already had a couple of season-ending injuries throughout his career, so it's a risk.
Yeah, it is a risk, and again, I think it's such a mixed opinion. I get where Niall's coming from. He sees the bigger upside. I think ultimately when they brought in Cliff Kingsbury, for the nature of no matter which particular quarterback we're going to take a quarterback from the college game. He's just come from the college game. That he be comfortable coaching up this quarterback, and we have seen him do quite well in the past, and even the opening season when he was head coach with the Cardinals in terms of developing Kyler Murray. So I think they will recognise that he's come in and they'll be comfortable, and Dan Quinn will allow him to do what he needs to do to make sure this quarterback is effective from day one. Because essentially, this quarterback, whether it is May or whether it's Jayden Daniels, or even this odd conversation where JJ McCarthy may even go to, ultimately, he's going to start next season. and he's gonna be very much aware that the pressure's gonna be on from day one going in there. But I think that's the nature of why they went down the route of bringing in a college offensive coordinator, albeit being with previous head coaching experience in the league. That for me is the piece, and I think Jayden Daniels makes a lot of sense for the Cardinals.
No, the first overall pick goes to the Bears, and there won't be a drum roll on this one. The consensus pick is Caleb Williams. We all have Caleb Williams going there. It's the most foregone of foregone conclusions. Be an absolute shocker to end all shockers if anything other than that was to happen. But talk to us about Caleb. Is he a can't miss prospect, or is he? And the closer he gets to the draft now, the couple of people come out of the woodwork saying, "Oh, I wonder." Somebody out yesterday saying, "Oh, there's a couple of doubts surfacing about personality, character, whatever." Like, people will look for any excuse that they may be proven right on the off chance that things go wrong, and they can point back to that hot take down the line. But do you see him as the can't miss?
No, look, there's no such thing as a can't miss, especially when it comes to a quarterback in the Chicago Bears. But I think he is the right pick and the best pick in this draft for the Bears. Look, he's something they desperately miss. He's a quarterback who can make things happen. They've gone out and they've deliberately put pieces in place now. Gerald Everett, Keenan Allen. They've brought in some linemen there to kind of bulk up there as well, in Bates, who came from the Bills, and Colby Shelton to go in at center there. So it looks like what they're doing is they're learning from previous regimes who just drafted quarterbacks and threw them in with nothing around them. But in terms of Caleb Williams himself, I mean, you kind of mentioned it there. When people talk negatively about him, they're not talking negatively about what he does on the field. They're talking about what he does off the field. And that to me says that, like, no one's perfect. He has his issues on the field, but they're not as glaring. I think he's a player. The worst thing I hear about people say is that he goes off script too much kind of, hero ball. Well, you have to look at the team he was playing at. Look how bad that defense was. Look what they gave up every week. It came to a point last year where he was getting criticized for losing games, but then they'd lose the game 43-37. And you're like, wait, how can you put that on the quarterbacks? The kind of way. So I think he is that talented, exciting player who can make all the throws. He's athletic. He has a strong arm on him. And I think for the Bears, it's a big one now. It is an important one, though, for Ryan Poles. But I think it's the right move. I think he's a player that's going to make them better. I think they've built a team to kind of suit him. And yeah, it's just now it's up to the Bears to go out there and to maximize him. I did have an interview the other day that will drop beforehand, and the point made by Greg Braggs from CHGO is, it's the right move, but now these Bears coaches need to do their job, and they need to maximize this talent and do what other coaches haven't done for the Bears previously. So I think it's a good move, and as a Bears fan, I'm genuinely excited now to see how everything kind of works when this move gets made.
Brian, it's an interesting pick, and not that it's a surprise, but I suppose one of the things that's interesting, and you mentioned Jayden Daniels going into quite a pressurized situation in Washington with everything that's riding on it. Caleb Williams goes into a very pressurized system, even given what comes with the baggage of being the number one overall pick, because he's not arriving into a completely broken team that's picking at first because they were the worst team in the league, as the Bears were last year. He's coming into a team that's made progress, that's fixed a lot of gaps, seems to have got the defensive side of the ball right, that has, as Noel said, added weapons in anticipation of having the support infrastructure around a rookie quarterback. So, and it's a 7-win team from last year, right, which is unusual, very unusual for a number one overall pick because it came via the Panthers. He's expected to win and win quickly.
Yeah, I think ultimately that might be the biggest test of the season. I don't think anybody can, question his overall play from what we saw in the college game. Nolan is right, some particular podcasts this week will be a bit outspoken about how loose he can be in terms of his cannon, and he lets the ball fly at the inappropriate times in the games. But again, these are the things, I suppose, steep learning curves he'll have. But you're right, he's going into a team, and where Bryce Young went into a team last year, and look, it was a difficult year for him. There wasn't lofty expectations. I wouldn't say the lofty expectations for the Bears, but certainly think people do expect them to be ultimately challenging, to be up there again. It's a competitive division. We spoke with the Vikings potentially making a move. The Packers obviously have rebounded after the Aaron Rodgers, move, and they made the playoffs. The Lions have done what they've done and gone to the championship game. But people will expect the Bears to be challenging, next season, certainly to be in a wild card position. And that comes with the pressure of a quarterback that will quickly learn if he's has early struggles and the questioning comes and the pressure comes, how he deals with that. Maybe ultimately it won't be about what he does on the field, it's about how he reacts to certain things off the field. We saw a couple of years ago with Jets and Zach Wilson, how he dismissed certain things in press conferences, which kind of only led to people disliking him even more as opposed to what he was doing on the field. I think it'd be interesting to see how he gets on the opening few months and he deals with that particular pressure. And it'll only ramp up as the schedule comes out. People see who the Bears play week 1, week 2, and how quickly he's on the bright lights of NBC for various different games, Sunday Night Football, and then obviously ESPN on Monday, etc.
I'll give you the last word on the number 1 overall pick here. And you've watched so much more of this tape than we have as the resident college football junkie. And I might put to you something that I heard Daniel Jeremiah say, which made an awful lot of sense, which is when you're evaluating these quarterbacks at the top end of the draft, sometimes what separates them in people's minds is how you got to allow for what one guy had and how you got to subtract what another guy didn't have. So if you take, say, Jaden Daniels, for example, unbelievable season, but people are going, yeah, but he had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. to throw to. Drake May didn't have those weapons. Caleb Williams probably, if anything, elevated his draft stock last year by having overall a pretty damn good season, despite having very little around them and a defense that let them down on a weekly basis. However, if you're looking for a knock, the Notre Dame game was one that stuck in a lot of people's craw as you really didn't show there.
Yeah, and what a lot of people forget is that at USC he had a terrible line. I mean, he was improvising a lot because that line was folding right in front of him. He was scrambling a lot. A game against UCLA stands out. There was a whole bunch of plays where the line crumbled as soon as the ball was snapped, and he was just spraying it left and right, and he was making plays out of nothing. I mean, if ever there was a quarterback that's NFL ready and that's hitting the ground running as an NFL prospect, it's this guy. I mean, he's been living in a penthouse in Los Angeles. He's got his 10 million NIL money. He could have come out last year. He took his time. Didn't have a huge amount of weapons. He's got Jerry Rice's. Well, he did have Jerry Rice's son to throw to. Not a great USC team. Historically, a phenomenal team in college football that produces a huge amount of NFL talent. But what you did talk about the defense, but that O-line, it's forgotten a lot. It was really, really bad, and that led to a lot of the scrambling plays that you saw last year, a lot of the speed, a lot of the footwork that he's developed, and thinking on his feet, and those circus plays, and just being able to make something out of nothing. He's another thing to remember is he's come through. He started. He came to Oklahoma. He came through where Baker Mayfield and Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray have been with Lincoln Riley, and he's come through a system where it's almost like they're prepping them for NFL careers. And he's had a great pathway. Everything he's done up until now has pointed right towards the NFL. My main concern with him, and I think I've brought it up in the past, I just have a couple of not problems, but I have a couple of question marks about his makeup, his mental makeup. I'm not going to bring up him crying after some losses because I'm not going to fault a professional player from being emotional after a game. I just have some questions about big city life and those Friday nights coming out of the clubs at 4 a.m. saying something that might trigger some people or piss people off. I'm just concerned about him teetering towards that LeBron level of splitting people in one camp or another. I think he's got phenomenal talent. I think his mouth is going to get him in trouble a couple of times this year. And I think he's going to have to be mindful of that. But I think he's going to be a great quarterback if he can figure out the social aspect and the social
Kieran,
media.
Chicago has been waiting 40 years for another loudmouth quarterback who spills out of nightclubs at 4 a.m.
Well, yeah, that's true. Different time
that
though.
all day long.
There was no TikTok back in the day when old Headband was walking around.
He didn't need TikTok.
I just, he had some great games in college. I mean, he put up huge numbers on Deion Sanders, Colorado. He did get beat up by Notre Dame, but I think if ever there was a quarterback coming out of the draft that's ready to hit the ground running, I think he's going to be a Baker Mayfield kind of impact. From college into the NFL, a lot of razzmatazz, a lot of fanfare. I just hope that he can, keep his feet in the ground and understand that, there's a lot more to being an NFL quarterback than the TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah. Go Razzmatazz. We will have that pick coming up in just over 24 hours time. Just a reminder that we're going live. Watch along with us from 1 a.m. on Friday morning. Once the NFL draft gets underway in Detroit, we're going right through to the end of the first round. All 32 picks, analysis and insight right with us here and on Instagram, on our Instagram channel. And that's all for our last pre-draft preview, 10 to 1. You can check out the other two segments where we went from 32 to 11 over the past 2 weeks in anticipation of the draft tomorrow night. So you can have all your homework done when we get to the meat and drink of who's actually picking whom, and dispense with mock drafts and consensus pick, and start figuring out what's going to happen with the new acquisitions that each team puts on the board. That's all for the NFL show, Irish NFL show for now. We'll be back with you very soon.